guys to write write a letter to their father. You just write a letter to your father, right? Kind of explaining the challenges that you've had over your lifetime, and what things you would like to do different, and what you would have hoped would come out of their relationship. I mean, so there were a couple of bullet points. We gave them some parameters, and we also gave them some boundaries. And I'm just sharing this story with y'all to just kind of, again, talk about this pain that so many of these men deal with. So one guy comes over to me, and we knew we would have some literacy challenges, and so that's why we had a number of volunteers. The guy comes over, and he says to me, I can't write, but I'm going to tell you what I want you to write, and if you would write it for me, I really want to do this activity, and then I want to send this letter to my dad. And like this guy he basically started off the letter, Dad, I forgive you for raping me, for 8 years, and just on and on and on. This guy just really started to kind of pour out all of this information about things that had happened to him. And I share that with you. Go to the next slide. Because some of the lessons that I've learned, or some of the things that I think are critically important when we talk about working with these young men, is we really got to begin to figure out how we can rebuild the family relationships. When I look at my cousin, before he went to prison, he had destroyed most of the relationships in our family. He had stolen stuff from my aunt and done a whole bunch of different things, right? And so we got to figure out how to rebuild relationships with family and extended family, because here's what happens in many communities. They walked in my cousin's cell, and they basically told him, even though he was supposed to serve another year, they told him, "You going home." And so they basically let him go on a Wednesday afternoon. Put all your stuff together. They give you a long clear plastic bag. They put all your stuff in there, and you leave, right? No treatment plan, no debriefing. They just literally let him go, right? And so I remember he called my mother and said, I'm on my way home. And she called me because she was like, well, what are we going to do? And so I just share that with you because a lot of times, a lot of the stuff that y'all may think goes on when these men and women transition out of prison, they just let you go. Now again, imagine being locked up for a year. So you, for example, imagine you locked up in a box for a year. You shower when they tell you to shower. You got this dude right here. Let's keep it real. That's your cellmate. When you go to the bathroom, he's sitting right. You have no privacy whatsoever, right? You eat when they tell you to eat. You go to sleep when they tell you to go to sleep. You wake up when they tell you to wake up. Even though he's your cell, the guy in the cell with you, can you really trust him? Even though he looked like a nice young man, you in jail. And so imagine living in that kind of environment. You got to watch everybody, right? Imagine living in that kind of environment and they come in and tell you, oh, you going home tomorrow. Now, you're excited about going home, but what ends up happening, y'all, a large percentage of the people who come home, there's no treatment plan, there's no debriefing. A lot of these guys have issues with substance abuse. A growing percentage of these men might be HIV positive. They have issues with a whole host of mental health challenges, and they just get released. And so this whole idea around building these family networks, finding some family member who can help advocate for this guy when he comes home is pretty important. What I have seen is that the more family support somebody has when they come home, the greater the likelihood they're gonna stay home. We talked a little bit about the media, men's support groups. Like I run a men's support group in DC, and it's really a process. It's really an intergenerational process designed to have younger men and older men be able to sit in a group and being able to kind of be in a space that's both emotionally and physically safe. Because where's the only place that men have that's emotionally and physically safe that they can talk about their issues?
Barbershop.
Who said that? How'd you know that? You're not supposed to know that. That's classified information. The barbershop is like, you said the bar?
Yeah, the bar.
The barbershop is the man's country club. And so outside of barbershops and maybe a bar, there are not a lot of places where men can just talk about, you know, look, man, I can't find this job. My man was telling me I could get out there with a pack and I could make some money. And so, you know, creating these kind of support groups to really begin to have men feel like they're in a space open enough where they can talk about their challenges, as well as younger men can kind of benefit from the experiences of older men. Go back one slide. Go back one more. Okay. Some of the other things that I think are really important: building a network of mental health providers. One of the biggest tragedies that I see in the social service arena is we just don't have enough clinicians to address the mental health challenges of just men, period. And when you start talking about men that are coming home from prison, it's difficult. It's difficult for, even if you're not coming home from prison, right? Even if you have insurance, it's difficult to find mental health providers. But this whole notion of mental health support is really critically important. And so at this point, I'm gonna shut down, because I could continue to go, but I really want to take, and I know we've been rushing through some stuff, but I really want to take questions, because I'm sure many of you may have complex questions that I may be able to answer.
All right.
Yes, come on, jump out there.
How do you deal with, let's say, teenage boys that they are growing up in well environments with amazing families, they're knowledgeable about the media and what's out there, but they still end up in gang violence, or they end up in the streets selling drugs? How do you, what are like your resources to cope with that, or to try to make that better?
Right. So, you know, it's interesting because, you know, even some of the work that I've done in very affluent suburban communities, the parents are blown away when they find out that their son or daughter is a gang member or involved in these kind of activities. I mean, the reality is that I think it's just critically important. Young people need to be engaged. Young people, even you guys. I mean, you guys are college students. I mean, young people need to be involved in positive activities, whether it's leadership stuff, debate, sports, you know, whatever it is. And I think we have a generation of parents who think that parenting is just giving a kid an iPad, and you got the iPad, and now you can just be in your room with the door locked doing whatever. And so making sure that young people, particularly young boys, are engaged in activities where they are out of the house. You know, the difference between, say, this generation and my generation, we would be outside playing all the time. I took pictures of some kids the other day outside playing, because I was blown away just to see kids outside. Do y'all realize that young folks don't play anymore? Do y'all realize that? Like, if we would leave in the summertime, we would be outside at 8 o'clock in the morning. The only time we would come back in the house was to get something to eat. And we would be outside like all day, ripping, running. Children don't even know how to play anymore. I was out with my children climbing trees over the holiday, and these kids walked up to me and was like, "Mister, can you teach me how to climb a tree?" And I'm looking at this kid like, "You don't know how to climb a damn tree?" Oh, I'm not supposed to curse. I'm sorry. And so children don't know how to play, and so it is the responsibility of the parents. Sometimes we got to disconnect from technology. You know, we started a campaign a couple of years ago asking parents to select 4 weekends out of the year to disconnect from the technology. And the parents are like, "We can't do it." I'm talking no TV, no cell phone, no Facebook, no Twitter. The parents were like, they can't do it. And I even designed like a 25-page pamphlet, brochure. These are things that you can do with your children over the weekend while you we called it a technology fast. Parents are like, "I can't do it. I can't do it." And so part of what we got to do is we got to disconnect from technology. And parents got to spend more time, you know, with their children. I mean, when you look at how things are now, children spend more time with their teachers than they do with their parents. And so that's something that's got to change. Questions? Yes, come on.
Okay, you said there's 2.6 million children of incarcerated parents, right?
Yeah.
And that's a large number, and I was thinking, you know, if people have kids with that would like inspire them to make better decisions. But another part of me was thinking maybe the child is the reason they turn to crime because, you know, they want the best for their child, but then they go for like quick money. And
Right.
do you agree with me? Like, do you feel
Well,
like
I mean,
that's the
part
reason?
of it also is that I'm trying to think of the easy way to explain this. It's like so the easiest way, I've lived in two worlds most of my life, right? Even though I'm academically trained, I'm still in the street. And when I say I'm still in the street, I'm still in the street working with people, doing different kind of projects. And then there are days when I might just be standing on the corner, just, you know, just talking to people, getting material, ideas for a new book project. And so what ends up happening is some people just live, it's almost like they live in what they see on one of these music videos. They are so connected to this very negative street culture in terms of the dress, the language, the lifestyle, and nothing else matters to them other than being viewed as being authentic in the streets. And so this whole notion of street credibility is more important than anything else, making sure that you got a reputation, even if you've never even killed anybody, having a reputation of that you're a killer in the neighborhood, right? You ain't never even fired a water gun, but you want guys in the neighborhood to know that you are a killer, and so you walk around. You walk around with this kind of mentality, and the sad reality is that kind of street culture is it's overwhelming. And the reason why I say it's overwhelming is because I can just think back to even when I was younger. It's something about standing on that corner, you know. And I don't know y'all backgrounds, but it's intoxicating standing on that corner, right? Even though you know that you don't have no business being on that corner. And so for young people, whether you're in Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, wherever, just to be able to stand on that corner in one of these neighborhoods, because guess what? You see everything in the neighborhood, right? How many of y'all from a tough neighborhood? 25 hours a day. The block never closes. People hustling, people out there yelling and screaming. You got so much live entertainment on the street corner. You know, that is intoxicating. And some people live their entire lives. It's like an addiction. Stand on a corner. You out there. Even if you're not selling drugs. And sooner or later what ends up happening is, and you definitely see it with the juvenile arrest rates, a lot of times young people are standing on the corner, they're not selling drugs, they don't have a weapon, but they end up getting arrested because they're standing on a known drug corner.
Yeah.
And then when the police roll up, you know, they curse at the police, next thing you know, you in handcuffs. And so part of it is it's just that kind of gritty urban lifestyle, the stuff that Biggie used to, y'all, Biggie, okay, Biggie used to talk about. That life on that corner is just so intoxicating that so many young people never even begin to connect to, like, this thing is real dangerous, right? And then even when you look at those children, the sad reality is a lot of those children end up in the system. A lot of those children end up in the system. Very sad. A lot of those children are being raised by grandmothers. A lot of those children are being raised, end up going into like different systems, foster care. But there's just an alarming number of children who have one or more. Imagine if you got both your parents in prison. Have any of you ever seen the movie Antoine Fisher?
Yeah.
Great movie. Yes, sir.
Just a question on it. I have noticed that, like, pertains to like New York City, there has been a lot of arrests made because of stop and frisk, but mostly it's like racial profiling.
Yeah.
So what do you see? How do you see that going on? Like, as far as like problem wise, like what do you see in the future with that, and what do you suggest to like prevent it?
I think grassroots mobilization and activism we got to be able to name an issue, and we got to be able to mobilize people around it. There was a young man that was featured in a New York Times article, and I can't remember what borough he lived in. He's a young dude. He was stopped like maybe 45 times in a year. You know, just because of young black male living in a public housing project. This dude would just be coming outside. As soon as he come outside, they throwing him up against the wall. And so, sustained activism. What I think happens is when you look at the Trayvon Martin incident, a lot of marching, a lot of people putting hoodies on, but no sustained activism, right? No sustained activism. So most people couldn't tell you anything about the court proceedings, what's going on in court, because it's almost if we get really excited and frustrated when there's an initial act of injustice, and then we march for a couple months, and then you don't. When's the last time any of you heard anything about Trayvon Martin? And so I think the lesson that you guys can kind of learn from that experience is that this notion around community activism, you know, the work that President Obama was doing in Chicago, that grassroots community activism where you were, you know, connecting college students to movements and connecting community residents to real issues. I mean, that's the kind of mobilization work that can really begin to, challenge stuff like stop and frisk. But what happens is, with something like stop and frisk, it's a policy. It's an unwritten policy in every police department in America. You know, interesting thing is, and I was telling Janice this, I've been stopped by the police in probably every city in this country. Literally. Whether I was driving while black, walking across campus, I mean, you name it. And so this issue of stop and frisk particularly is an issue that we really got to mobilize community. And it can't just be one segment of the community. I mean, we really got to focus on mobilizing the larger community, because it's a civil rights violation. But it's a matter of policy. Different places they call it something different. Some places they call it a field interview, where he's walking down the street and I'm just going to stop him. Where you going? Where do you live? What are you doing around here? You got any weapons? You know, you mind if I pat you down? And he might think, well, I don't have a gun, I don't have anything on. Sure, you can pat me down real quick, because I'm headed back over to school to go to class or whatever the case may be. And so it is a major issue. It definitely is a major issue. Yes?
Some people, some parents, even though they're willing to spend time with their kids, there's like, the kids are just too away from them. How can they, what can they do to get them off the streets, even when they're willing to spend time with them?
I mean, having a child that's out of control is a very difficult issue. I mean, I've worked with a lot of families, good families, doing everything they're supposed to do, but for whatever reason, the child is out of control. I mean, the first thing is counseling. Is a combination of both counseling and really figuring out what are some of the kinds of things that those young people are interested in, and getting them engaged. Again, I'm going back to the thing I said to this young lady. So many youth in America do nothing other than sit in the house and watch NBA Housewives. And so we got a generation of young folks who, for the most part, are not really active physically, not really being engaged mentally. And so I think parents have to be willing to, try to figure out how they can aid. Counseling is critically important. And in order to move to the counseling piece, we got to really address the stigma related to mental health. I mean, people think, like, if you stood up in the room and said, I'm going to see my therapist today, there are people in the room that would look at you differently. Like, oh, so we knew something was wrong, huh? And so, I'm just using you for an example. We know nothing's wrong. But, this issue of mental health is critically important. And I think the challenge is so many clinicians now are prescribing very dangerous drugs to little children. You got 7-year-olds on Prozac, right? Lithium. And so, again, community has to be more knowledgeable about mental health and about issues related to medication. But it is a big issue, though. Okay, over here. Come on.
Well, currently interning for the Osborne Association.
Oh,
And
okay,
we work
Osborne.
with children whose parents are incarcerated.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Sabrina also interns with me, and one of the things we notice is that perception and the stigma is an issue with the youth that we serve. So my question to you is, how do we reverse the stigma and reverse the internal racism and the flaws that? How do you reverse all that?
Right.
What steps
Now,
need to be taken?
I do think that the upside of your generation is y'all have so much access to technology, and some of it is how do we use technology for social justice. And so there are a number of groups across the country that are using things like creating YouTube video projects with young people to look at things like stop and frisk, using things like Facebook. Like I do a lot of. I'm really connected to social media, but I tell people that if you send me something, don't send me no nonsense, right? Because there's and so I think using social media to create a counter narrative. Young people are into technology, and I think that if you're using technology to promote social justice, I mean, even doing something like having even looking at an issue like stop and frisk, and having young people create a short video. They can use a camera phone to create the video. The editing software, a lot of times for video, is relatively inexpensive. Using the technology to both help influence and to teach young people things like decision making, and some of the other kinds of things that you guys really want to do. I mean, I think that you guys have a leg up because you are so media savvy in terms of the technology. But I think a lot of times we're using the technology for nonsense. Having a youth-led, video project. I mean, there are a number of groups across the country. There's some groups in New York City that are already using both video and multimedia to teach young people. I think that that's still a very powerful medium. Yes.
Do you think sometimes there's too much importance placed on music and stuff? Because I'll admit I do like some chains, but I know that it's car music. It's not music that I'm gonna structure my life around.
Right. I mean, it is what it is. I think going back to the media, I think that we have the music industry is not gonna stop pushing nonsense because there's so much money in it. But again, I think that we have the power that we can create independent media. See, I'm not trying to get a major record label to stop producing records where everything they talk about is rob, kill, murder, and go to prison. They're not going to stop doing that. But I think we have, in this era of social media and access to things like YouTube, I think that we have the power to create, music that's more appropriate, but at the same time, can be somewhat edgy. I mean, have any of y'all ever heard of Raheem DeVaughn?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
love
So
him.
Raheem DeVaughn is a guy we were working with even before he got a major record deal. And so Raheem DeVaughn was doing neo soul street mixes, doing some underground stuff. And so, one of the things we got to do is we got to support artists that are positive. A lot of times, the artists that are positive, so for example, I mean, I've done a couple projects with Common, Talib Kweli, and Mos Def. Talib, Common, and Mos Def, all of them were in the music game for years. But it was very hard for them to get their songs played on the radio. It was very hard for the DJs to play their music in the club because most of their music was not talking about going to prison and shooting everybody and becoming a gang member. And so I think even with things like social media, we have the power to promote underground artists. We got the power to promote artists through video and through a lot of the media channels. But the question is, are we willing to do it? Somebody else said that now. Okay.
Well, first off, my name is Mikhail. I am the student ambassador of my academy, the Student Association, and the reason why I heard about this is because it's very important to understand mentorship and helping the youth and others that can be able to share those same access and skills to other communities that can also bring the other ones to become role models. Like you said, most black males, it's not easy for them to receive education or any of those services. This happened to me actually when I was younger, and I didn't have a good father except the mother. So of course, I had an absent father for a long time, haven't seen him since then. But at the same time, that is a great example because we still, again, as student leaders, need to push those that have to become advocates for their community, those that need to be mentored, those that need to be helped. So we usually set up workshops on Fridays and Thursdays. I was also part of the Black Male Initiative to support other male students and their parents because some of them didn't go to college or those opportunities. So I think this is an excellent source of information to pass on to other ones that need to be helped.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
So actually I have a few questions. In your food for thought slide, you propose some solutions, right? And I guess I'm kind of jaded from this system.
Okay, okay.
Okay. I guess adequate about 1,000 downstate. So I guess I'm a product of it, and I see amongst the individuals that I've come to know in my travels that some of them don't come home to this support, to these relationships. However, they still change.
Yeah.
And it's this inner change within them. I mean, it's something that sparks within them. That no matter what happens, they persevere.
Right, right.
How do you explain that? Or like, what is missing in all these community-based organizations?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'll turn my phone. Go ahead.
That give all this support and you have these networks, these resources, but they still slip through the cracks.
I think that the challenge that we are confronted with, and I think a lot of folks are jaded because I think that the challenge that we are faced with is that the numbers, just the sheer number of people who are incarcerated, and the sheer number of people that come back to any community in any part of the country, it's just overwhelming. In Baltimore, for example, there was a study done where they could basically pinpoint what neighborhoods those young men are most likely to come from who are being incarcerated, and you know, the fact that they end up coming back to these 3 or 4 different zip codes. And then the challenge is, well, how do we begin to marshal those resources in those 3 or 4 zip codes where we know that those young men are going to come back to? Part of it is political, which is very frustrating at times because there are a lot of reports done, there's a lot of good data, but a lot of times the data just sits on the shelf. People don't actually use, a lot of times people are not actually using the data to create interventions and to address some of those challenges. And some of that is political. A lot of times we have local officials that just don't have the political will to do what is necessary, even if it's not popular. The second thing is that the system is still inherently broken, particularly when you talk about things like employment. While it is far easier now to get a job if you have a felony charge than say it was 5 or 10 years ago, it's still very difficult if you have a criminal record. Why? Because you got so many people out here without a criminal record who are looking for employment. I think one is political, and the second thing, man, is I think that in terms of some of the larger issues, I just don't think that we care enough about those men and women that are, while we're here in this space, I don't think that we care enough about those people that are locked up. I think that most people are very disconnected because they don't have a loved one in prison. They may not know anybody in prison. And so they don't realize that people come home every day, like you said, and literally like turn their lives around. I'm working with a guy out of Trenton, New Jersey, you know, served some time in jail. Now he owns the largest construction company in Trenton, New Jersey, right? Again, another example of a guy who went to prison, came home, and is doing well, but you probably will never hear his story. And so I think also some of it is just the will, the courage to do what's right, because it's not your family member.
We're gonna take 2 more questions.
Okay, Nicole.
Nicole.
Okay, so I hear you.
We know that there's a problem. We know that blacks and brown people are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. We know that we're represented poorly in the media. And we know that if we want to see change, we can use social media to promote it. But what exactly can we do without it being a bunch of small projects that in the long run look unorganized to the public?
Right, and that's a great question. Part of it is you start with small projects. Because what ends up happening is my experiences with a lot of the larger a lot of the advocacy groups on a larger level, a lot of times their stuff is really caught up in policy discussions, which I think are really important. But a lot of those policy discussions and a lot of the work that a lot of those larger organizations are doing doesn't necessarily trickle down into the community. And so I think starting smaller projects, volunteering and joining grassroots community organizations that are doing the work, and you bringing your level of skills to the table to help grow those smaller organizations. My experience has been, so let me give you a really good example. In Newark, New Jersey, you have a relatively small program. It's called the Newark Comprehensive Fatherhood Center. It's it's in Newark. It's a very small program. It's funded through Cory Booker in the city of Newark. They have a tremendous track record of working with low-income fathers who have a criminal record. The men have to go through like a 15 or 16-week job training class. They help kind of reunify them with their children, if it's possible. And while it is a small program, what they've been able to do is work with a number of the other smaller nonprofits that are in Newark to try to connect those dots. And so, some of the things that you guys can do, volunteer, join an organization. And even if it's as simple as you working with a grassroots community organization and they don't know how to use technology, but you know how to use technology, and you help them begin to develop a social media platform so that they can begin to tell their story. Many of the larger organizations, and I don't want to name any of them because we're on camera and I always get in trouble, but what ends up happening is a lot of them are just caught up in the politics. And so I have seen real authentic work being done, small community organizations. In Baltimore, you got a group called the Center for Urban Families. And they have a very small program, but now they have been acknowledged by the White House as sort of a national demonstration program to work with low-income men who are coming home from prison. They do everything like expungement, like for guys who have criminal records, because oftentimes there are things that are on these guys' records, they can be expunged. But when you look at them, they're a relatively small organization in a big city. But again, they have connected with smaller community organizations. Like they have a guy who comes in, all he does is expungement, right? They got somebody who comes in and they just work with these guys around child support and other things. And so the thing that I want you guys to understand is that there's a role for everybody in the room. You got to get in where you can fit in. Now there's some people who would say, well, how do we tackle some of the larger issues related to incarceration, like changing policy and changing laws? There are already a whole host of people that are doing that, right? On Capitol Hill, in local legislators. The challenge is we don't have enough people on the ground. We don't have enough people in the community working with men and women that are coming home from prison. And so there are large scale operations that are dealing with, like, all right, so check out the Sentencing Project. They got a whole bunch of reports on incarceration, policy briefs, whole bunch of data. So they're doing large stuff. But the challenge is, most of you in here, any of you work for a small community organization? So let's go to you. Does your organization have enough volunteers and people?
No.
That's the problem. The only way we're going to solve this is we got to start small, but we got to be more organized.
Let's take our final question.
I forgot to give you the question. Is there a way to create, I know we have certain programs for volunteering. Is there a way to create it for, like, colleges the first time, mentorship programs for the ones that have volunteering programs?
I lost you at the end. Say that again.
I said, is there a way to create internship programs and then other opportunities for the ones that are from present that could still give back to the community and do those things?
Yeah, and there are a lot of programs. There are a lot of programs. I mean, one of the things that you guys might not know, even through the Obama administration, there are probably 50 to 60